Breaking injury news, and the man to talk about it with us is with us. Today's injury report brought to you by Cape Regional Health System and Dr. Kevin McHale. Cape Regional Health System and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit us at caperegional.com/orthopedics. Doc, welcome back. The injuries continue to mount around all of the sports landscapes. We got breaking news here. Now, we've talked a lot about ACLs, but just to let the people know out there, Deshaun Watson suffered an ACL in practice. And one thing I'll ask you, I know this is kind of a curveball at you, Doc, but it apparently was a non-contact one. Those things are very weird to the fan. Like, what happens where your knee just kind of gives out like that as opposed to taking a hit and causing an injury, an ACL injury?
Yeah, it's really, really unfortunate to hear that Watson just had that ACL there. I mean, he has had a lights-out season as a rookie this year, and it's really unfortunate for the team. But in general, so when we're talking about ACL tears, they typically do occur from non-contact injuries. Unlike Jason Peters, last week we talked about how he had that lineman land on the outside of his leg. He injured the MCL and then tore the ACL in the process. With the ACL, its primary function is to stop that lower leg bone, the tibia, from shifting out in front of your femur. So what happens when these players are planting their foot and cutting, they can twist a little bit, and it leaves a lot of force on that ACL, and it causes it to rupture. And that's the classic mechanism for these injuries. And unfortunately, we'll talk about some others that are going around the league that are much more severe than this one, but still a season-ending injury and really unfortunate for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, this injury here, just a nasty injury that a lot of people thought that there was a possibility that he might have had his leg amputated, and that's tight end Zach Miller, who underwent urgent vascular surgery on Sunday night to repair artery damage. He had a dislocated knee, and they called the procedure, you can probably help me with this one here, vascular surgery to repair the torn popliteal artery. So give us a little, how about that? Give us a little background on, first off, the dislocated knee sounds like something I don't want to have ever happen to me, not to mention what else happened to this to the leg here where they thought he might lose the leg. And I also read that they had to take some the graft from the one knee to help the other knee. I mean, this is a gruesome injury.
Yeah. So absolutely a gruesome injury. So a couple of things about this. So first of all, with a knee dislocation, this is very different than an ankle dislocation. Although they look gruesome too, you have the ankle, the foot sticking out to the side, like we talked about with Ronald Darby and Odell Beckham. This injury, it looks almost benign. He hyperextended it. When you see the slow motion replay, it looks pretty gruesome. But at the end of it, it spontaneously reduces. You just kind of hold on to his knee. Wouldn't think much of it. That being said, when you hyperextend your knee like that, not only do you tear multiple ligaments in the knee, that makes it very unstable, that popliteal artery, that artery that travels right behind the back of the knee, supplies the blood supply to the entire lower leg. So it splits off into three big branches right after the knee. But at that level, it's the primary artery that goes to the lower leg. So, when you have this hyperextension, knee dislocation, you tear that, it's absolutely a surgical emergency. It's very important to detect these injuries right away, get them to the hospital, and get it surgically repaired. Because if you don't get it fixed within about 8 hours or so, there's an amputation rate as high as almost 86-90%. So you absolutely have to treat these very, very seriously.
So, I mean, there's first off, the dislocated knee, that's not pleasurable, right? That takes a while to come back from. Getting something to this extent, what's the recovery on this? I mean, is this guy going to have, I mean, does he have any thought of playing football again?
Yeah, it'd be pretty unlikely. So when we think about Teddy Bridgewater, he went through a similar injury in that he had a multiple ligamentous knee injury, but he was fortunate enough to not have the vascular component. He did not injure an artery. So as a result, he still took 14 to 15 months to get back. He's practicing now, still not activated, but that would be the expected timeline without the vascular injury. With this kind of vascular injury, it's definitely going to delay the process. And I would not expect to see him next season. And, unfortunately for him, that may mean a career-ending injury. But, it's really unfortunate. It sounds like all good news from the camp in that they, sounds like they saved the leg and he's on the right path. But, unfortunately, I'm not sure if we'll be seeing him on the field again.
Good explanation from Dr. Kevin McHale on that artery, not knowing that that's the main supply to the blood flow to your lower leg there. From Cape Regional Health System, Dr. Kevin McHale worked with the New England Patriots, and he now joins us each week with a look at some of the big injuries. Now, Joe Staley, last week against the Eagles, required surgery on his fractured orbital bone, and I know a lot of times in football, this is an odd football injury. You see it more in basketball. The guys end up wearing the mask. But you don't see it in football all that often. So tell us what you know about what happened here with Joe Staley.
Yeah, obviously we don't see in the football, all that much. In general, the helmet and the face mask do a pretty good job of protecting against these skull fractures and facial fractures. But the interesting thing about orbital fractures, there's two ways to get it. Really, you can get hit, crushed right in that bone right underneath your eye. But also a poke in the eye can lead to it as well. That force into the eyeball itself doesn't actually cause the eyeball to rupture, but it pushes through the weak floor of that socket and can cause a fracture there. Now, obviously, it can be a pretty severe injury. In general, with these, depending on how bad that break is, if it's big enough that the eyeball actually kind of starts to sink down a little bit and the surrounding muscles fall in there, you can get blurry vision and loss of certain types of eye motions, and it can be devastating. So that's when surgery is usually indicated, and we needed to get fixed and get them back. And even after surgery, sometimes there's some persistent blurry vision with certain types of eye motion. But in general, as long as he does okay from the treatment and gets back out on the field with a face mask and some protective shields, it's usually a couple of weeks. I think one of the most recent guys was James Harrison a few years back, 2011. I think he missed like 4 games. But he probably will miss the next couple of games, and I think they have their bye week 3 weeks from now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him until after the bye with some little protective gear. But definitely an unfortunate injury.
Good news there. All right, the injury that a lot of people have been waiting to hear from you all day on, as we were teasing that you were coming up with some more insight on this one, because I don't know that I've ever heard this before, a scapular muscle imbalance in the shoulder. So we talked a lot about Fultz. We didn't have a definitive answer to what was wrong. We now have a medical term, I guess, to use for his injured shoulder.
Yeah, so let's start off with the good news. The good news is there's still no structural issue, and that there's no rotator tear, there's no labral tear, there's nothing like that needs a surgical intervention. That being said, it's not something that you just kind of play through and tough out because there's nothing wrong. Because, as we talked about last week, these overuse injuries can be very, very painful and can become more of a problem if they're not addressed. So this scapular dyskinesis diagnosis, what that means, we're just talking about an imbalance of the way the one scapula is moving compared to the other side. And usually it can happen as a primary problem where somebody's mechanics are off, and that can lead to an injury. But more often what happens is there's some type of overuse injury in the shoulder that causes somebody to alter their mechanics to protect themselves, and as a result they start having a poor motion, and it leads to this scapular dyskinesis or poor scapular motion. So it's kind of like a fancy term for what we all already saw when we were watching the foul shot. So in general with this, as we talked about last week, you need to rest. You need to allow that inflammation to die down, that soreness to go away, get the motion back, and once all full painless motion's there, gradually get the scapula muscles and stabilizers strengthened, and then work on strengthening the shoulder. The scapula does a lot. You don't realize it. It actually forms that socket that creates the ball and socket of the shoulder joint, and it moves around a lot with any arm motion. So to get that scapula moving correctly is incredibly important for any type of sports activity.
What's the time frame? Originally it was 3 games. That got wiped out pretty quick. 3 weeks is what they're saying now, and then indefinitely, I guess, was kind of thrown out there. But somebody came to you and said, hey, I got this imbalance, overuse. How long do you anticipate telling them, well, you're not going to be playing basketball for how long?
Yeah, I think the 3-week timeline is much more along a reasonable line than the first 3 games. When they were talking about a week off after an overuse injury, it's very unlikely that a player is going to get back to play that quickly. 3 to 4 weeks, now we're giving the player enough time to rest and actually recuperate, and then rehab back to full strength is more possible. Now, unfortunately, with overuse injuries, sometimes these things can linger, and if you rush a player back, they can just re-injure themselves and have more of a problem down the line in the season. So, the Sixers have been playing pretty well recently. Hopefully they allow this kid to have enough time to rest and completely rehab, so when he's back on the court, he's fully healthy and ready to go. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little longer than the 3 weeks, but I think that's more along the timeline that's a little reasonable, and I think it'd be more optimistic about that timeline than the one we were discussing last week.
All right, good stuff with Dr. Kevin McHale from Cape Regional Health System and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Another week in the books and some good injury descriptions there for us, Doc. We'll do it again next week.
All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you guys soon.